right, I think we're live now. That's what this little icon's telling me. Hey, folks. I'm going to give it maybe a minute or so as people sort of pile in, but maybe just some housekeeping items that we can go through. One, we do have a team chat. We've got a couple of Quickbase experts, both on like the back end, how Quickbase actually works, and on the front end, like how our users interact with it, helping to moderate our chat. So be sure to throw questions and answers in there. I'd like to say this is a multimedia extravaganza. We're going to be looking at slides. We're going to be looking at Quickbase, at pipelines, at the developer portal. So make sure that both the slides and as soon as I start sharing my screen are appropriately sized on your On24 platform. I'm going to pull up the chat real quick so I can get going. And let's do this too. All right, so we've got about 44 people here, which I think is good enough to get started. Yeah? All right, super cool. All right, so we are here today to learn how we can use some of the new advancements we've made in pipelines combined with the new visualization capabilities of dashboards and the new summary aggregation formulas to create really powerful trend reports in Quickbase natively. For those who don't know me, my name is Ryan Murray. I'm a product manager at Quickbase, focusing on data visualization and dashboarding and sort of our insights pillar. Before I was on the product team, I actually started out at Quickbase on our care team, sort of did a year there, what we call like the master's program of Quickbase. And then after I spent some time on sort of the front lines, learning how our customers use our apps, I actually built apps for Quickbase to help run the business. And trend reporting was something that had come up very frequently, when we would get asked for data from our stakeholders. They'd want to see how we can show how our data changes over time. Now in Quickbase, historically that was really challenging because we didn't have, sort of an integration mechanism built into the platform. But with pipelines and some advancements to our summary reports and our new RESTful API, we're able to build these really powerful reports pretty simply. So if you are unfamiliar with how APIs work or how to use pipelines or building charts, that's okay. It may seem like we're moving quickly here, but everything's recorded, and I promise everything is totally achievable and learnable. Just like that first if statement you wrote in Quickbase may not have made sense right away, or that first URL button was tricky, and you got all those errors. You eventually got over it. You learned. This is just a new pattern, a new tool that you can put in your toolbox to help really make Quickbase shine, make your app shine. So let's go over the agenda today. We're going to start with the problem that we're solving. We'll go into the data structure, so how we can build a Quickbase table and relationships that's conducive to this type of reporting. We'll talk a little bit about the RESTful API and how we'll be using this to sort of generate the response that we need to create our data structure. And then we're going to put it all together with pipelines. Cool. So action-packed agenda. We're going to start with the problem that we're solving. So I like to break down problems into a couple of different things. So one, you might be asking, what problem are we solving right now that Quickbase sort of natively can't do today, that it can't do with just, sort of raw app building prowess. And then we're going to talk about how. So how we can use pipelines to come in and solve these new problems. So again, I'll ask you folks a couple of questions, hopefully to help settle or help solidify how, the types of problems that we're solving. So first question here, have you ever wanted to import a summary report directly into a Quickbase table? If you have, you're in the right session. Or have you ever wanted to build a report to show how your data changes day over day? Now, Quickbase is really, really great at, sort of that live look, real-time data, those operational insights, because you're submitting new records to your apps, every day, every minute, every hour. But how can you sort of capture that and trend it over time so you can see how this live data is changing and measure progress? Today, in this session, we're going to show you how you can take a summary report that looks like this, turn it into a Quickbase table that's structured like this, so you can build really powerful, awesome visualizations that look like this to show you how your data changes over time. Great. So let's look at the crew, how we're going to solve this. So in our sort of under the Quickbase umbrella, we have three new tools, or three tools that you can use to help build reports like this. First is the Quickbase app. Now, Quickbase, your application, is actually going to provide us with the summarized data that we need to create the trend report, and the data structure, the infrastructure to actually hold the data, hold those records. The RESTful API, we're actually going to use this to get the data that's contained in the summary report. So we're going to use sort of the power under the hood of Quickbase, that in-memory calculation and summarization of records in your applications. We're going to use the RESTful API to harness that, do all of that aggregation for us, so we get a raw output of just the simple numbers, just those scalar values. And then we're going to use pipelines to call the RESTful API, transform our data just a little bit, and then import them or create a record in our Quickbase application. Cool. Now let's look at what we're going to need for the data structure. So again, three really good questions to ask yourselves before your fingers even touch the keyboard. That was a pause for effect. You got to ask yourself what. So what do you want to trend? Next question here is when. So how frequently should we snapshot this data? The third question is why. Now let's talk about why each one of these are important. First, asking or answering the question of what you want to trend is going to provide some insight to what that data structure should look like. What metrics, what numeric fields, what sort of text fields do we want to snapshot and trend over time? In our case, which we'll get into just a little bit, we're tracking how we're tracking sort of the overall equipment efficiency of products and machines on a factory floor. Now, the next question here is when. So how frequently should we snapshot this data? And this is going to be informed by sort of your business requirements, right? So how often do you need to take action on this data? How quickly is your data changing in Quickbase? And this could be, every hour, every day, it could be something like a weekly snap where every Sunday you look at all of the records, all the care cases that were created that week to see how those are changing over time. The last question, most important question, and actually I probably should have put this first, now that I think about it, is why. So you should always ask why you're doing this. And this serves two purposes, I feel. The first is your time is valuable as Quickbase builders. What we've found, and in just sort of anecdotally my conversations with our builders, a lot of you folks wear a lot of different hats all the time. You're the process expert. You're sort of the communication expert. You're the one who knows your apps inside and out, and you're also doing the building. So your time is super valuable. So if you don't have a good answer for why you're doing this, probably don't need to. You can focus on other sort of more high priority options. The second reason why this question is so important is it probably is going to help inform what metrics you're tracking. So let's look, we'll give sort of a real world example on how this sort of will take shape in the demo that we're using today. So in our case, the what that we're tracking is the total number of losses and the overall equipment effectiveness of the machines on our factory floor and the products that they produce. Now, in this example, we're simplifying it and we're saying that every product has its own machine that's being created. Now, we want to see how this data changes every day so that we can spot emerging trends. So if we're seeing a lot of losses due to performance on a particular product day over day, we know that we can probably investigate that a little more heavily and maybe create some kaizens or some opportunities for improvement to help remedy the issues that we're running into. The important question here, why we're trending this? Well, we're going to analyze this data. Again, to mine for those process improvement initiatives. And in this case, it could be to deliver our products faster to our customers, to make sure that they're more reliable, and to save the business, and maybe implement some cost-cutting measures to help improve efficiency. Great. So let's start by looking at what we're going to need from Quickbase. First thing you're going to want to build in your application is a summary report that contains all of the data that we want to trend. Following me? Great. Next portion here is to create a new table in your application to hold the trended data. And we're going to need a field for each data point that we want to trend. Okay? I promise it'll make a little more sense as soon as we get into it. So let's go ahead and build. So give me 1 second to play sort of like the screen share shuffle here. All right, I'm going to share my whole desktop. All right, and you guys should all be seeing a new dashboard, right? Can I get a yes in the chat or from one of our moderators? We golden? Yes, all right, cool, thanks a lot. Great, so again, these are our new dashboards. I do encourage all of you to try these out and see, sort of the new types of problems that you can solve. But we're gonna just dive right into it and first talk about the summary report that contains the data that we want to trend. So in our case, we're gonna be trending how our losses, sort of change over time. And these losses are, as you can see, sort of created every day, multiple times a day on the factory floor. And we can say that these are maybe imported from an integration to our factory information system that's run by pipelines. Now we have this report, and maybe our manager, sort of the boss of the factory floor, wants to see, I just want to see how this data changes day over day. And this is probably how a lot of you might have discovered the need to build a trend report. You have the data summarized that you want to look at to help inform some maybe process changes or to do some deeper analysis. But you just don't know how to create the data structure to build this or to sort of report on this over time. So this report, let's actually dive into this because we're using some new Quickbase capabilities that will help that'll help us sort of drive these new metrics. So you'll notice here we're summarizing several different things. First thing is just the number of losses. So we just want to see overall by each product, right? So we're grouping this by our product name. By each product, how many times do we have to sort of maybe shut down the production line? So that's kind of the number of losses. The next thing that we'll add here, and this may be a little tricky to wrap your mind around now, but when we sort of get to the data structure portion of this, I promise it'll make a little more sense, is the product ID. Now we're summarizing this by, in this case, maximums. You could use averages or minimums, but essentially what we want to do here is to create a column in our summary report that we can use as the reference field to our products table, so we can directly relate our data, our products table, to our trending data, to our trend table. And this will allow us to pull through lookup fields to add more data points to report on or summarize some data if you wanted to sort of go back up the other way. So in this case, we're showing the product ID, and we're going to summarize this by maximum so we get that value to join the two tables. Now these next three columns here are, they're actually report formulas. Now, if you remember sort of how our data was structured, we're gonna sort of detour really quickly. We have basically a record for every loss that comes into Quickbase. And these losses have categories and they have loss reasons, right? So in this case, our loss reason is equipment failure and the category is availability. Now, what we wanted to do here was create a column to trend or to report on the total loss for this particular category, for this particular product on this particular day. And now what we're doing here is one of my favorite tricks. This was sort of a mind-opening experience when I discovered this. So hopefully you guys, if you're not using it now, you have a new tool in your toolbox to go and build meaningful reports. But I've actually created 3 report formulas that will only summarize the duration for a particular category in one column, so we can create that in Quickbase. So it's a really simple formula, but it has a lot of utility and a lot of power behind it. So what we're saying is if our loss category is due to availability, we're going to show the duration. Otherwise, we're going to show just 0 minutes, so basically empty or null. Same for quality. If our loss category is quality, show the duration, otherwise show nothing, and for performance. Now, this case just happened to work out. It just happened to work out for me. I have 3 report formulas available to me, and I had 3 categories. So then what we'll do is we'll summarize each of those report formulas to build that column in our summary report. And I'm going to pop back to my slide really quickly so we can sort of see this as we're looking at the report settings. So make sure that your windows are sized appropriately in the platform. So here we'll have our availability downtime, our quality downtime, and our performance downtime as their own columns in this report. Awesome. Then we add one of our new capabilities that Kat talked about during the keynote the other day. We have a new summary sort of report formula that we're going to use to aggregate this data and to create our overall equipment effectiveness metric. Now this, for those who aren't familiar with the manufacturing process, just think of this as sort of like a power score for how your factory performed or how your production line performed on a particular day. So what we do is we've summarized, we've created new variables for our duration field, so our total, for our availability downtime, that report formula, the quality downtime, and the performance downtime. And what we're doing is we're just getting basically the ratio. So how much of a particular day could we say we are down due to availability versus performance versus quality? So we'll create this formula, and essentially we just take the total time that we were down, divide that by the total number of minutes in a day, which is 1,440. I had to Google that. And then we multiply the 3 scores together. Great. Now the last portion here, and again, this is probably going to be informed by that second question, the when, so how often do you want to trend, gets us today's records. Now, if you're snapshotting weekly, you might want to show only the records that were created during the current week or had a significant date during a current week. Maybe you're tracking how many projects you close. You want to look at how many were closed or how many have a close date during the period you want to trend. This could also be used to do cumulative totaling. So we could say, show me everything. I just want to see the total amount I was down by every product every year, and we would just remove this filter. And every day we would create sort of a new total. Awesome. All right, so I think that's enough of the summary report for now. I hope you have a good understanding of sort of the processes and what we're doing here. So I'm going to go ahead and save this. And now we're going to go look at our trends table. Now, I didn't want to sort of bore you folks with the how we actually create these records, but I am going to do sort of one of my favorite Quickbase tricks. We're going to look at these 2 tables side by side to get a better idea of how our summary columns translate to Quickbase records. So here, really simple. We've got our number of losses column, right? And what I've done in this issue trends table, I've created a field for number of losses. I've also created a field for our related product, which is our product ID. We're just mapping this 8, in this case here, the PLR 400. We've got another column for our availability downtime, our performance downtime, our quality downtime, and then our overall equipment effectiveness. And remember, because I'm importing this product ID field over here, I was able to create a relationship between our products table using that new reference field that I'm sort of importing from our summary report, which may be like a crazy phrase to wrap your mind around, but promise it's going to get really clear really soon. And I'm able to add new lookup fields. So let's say I wanted to trend this by plant. I could very easily come in here and add a field called plant name, bring this down, and now I have another way to sort of slice my data. Great. So let's move on to the next portion of our program and talk about the RESTful API and how we're going to use I still call it new, it's been around for a year, but it's new to me, how we're going to use this new functionality, our new JSON APIs to transform this summary report into records for every day. Okay, cool. Now I do get excited, so I'm going to take another second to just take a sip. Okay, super cool. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to move this over here, and we're going to take a look at our RESTful API. So if this is new to you, again, don't be sort of intimidated by sort of the scope or the vastness of the new problems that you can solve with our RESTful API. If you have experience with our XML API, but you don't have experience with our JSON API, I can promise you, you're going to have a much more delightful experience using this. And if you don't have experience with any of our APIs, we're going to walk through just a really quick example so you can start to tool around and learn some new tricks. So I think Daniel linked the developer link. Okay, cool. Everyone can still hear me. Yep, Daniel, thank you again. Make sure to go to developer.quickbase.com to view this. We're going to be using two APIs, or two endpoints, I should say. We're going to be using the run a report API, and we're going to be using the auth API. Awesome. So let's take a look at what sort of the run a report looks like and sort of what it does. At a really high level, this just asks Quickbase to go get the records, or go get the data, I should say, from a particular report. You can run this against table reports, against summary reports, against our charts, against our timeline reports, against our calendar reports, to return the actual data that you see. And this is very different than the underlying data or the underlying records that make up this report. We're actually returning, in cases where we're summarizing data, like summaries, charts, even calendars to an extent, we're showing you, we're actually displaying you what your user will see in the UI. So we're abstracting away all of the summarization logic that you would need to write on your own, and basically opening up sort of the power of that in-memory database and our aggregation capabilities in the API. Super exciting. Again, one of my favorite things that we've released in the past couple of years. So let's look at sort of what information Quickbase needs from us in order to make a request to this run a report endpoint. Now, over here on the right-hand side, these are our sort of fields, or the parameters that we're going to put into our request in order to get the data back. And we have sort of we have identifiers of what these parameters actually mean in terms of your application. So I'm going to go ahead and go back to sort of dual screen mode so we can look at these side by side. Hopefully this looks good to you and I'm zoomed in enough. I'm going to go back to my losses table. Actually, I think it's in this tab. Okay, awesome, it is. And we're just going to pull information from over here, and we're going to fill it in on our API portal. And what we'll be able to do is actually send a test request to get a sense for what this data looks like. Awesome. So first thing I'm going to put in here is the report ID. I'm sure you all know where to find the report ID in Quickbase. It's what comes after the QID parameter. We're going to copy this to our clipboard and paste it right on over here. Awesome. Now, I don't know if you caught that. It was subtle, but you'll notice that our request up here, it changed dynamically based on some of the inputs that we put in our form over here. Next, table ID. We're going to go ahead and copy this, paste it over here, and you'll watch the magic of our sort of endpoint updating in real time. Now, these skip and top parameters, we're not going to use today, but I'll tell you just sort of what they do at a high level. Skip is important for sort of paginated responses. So if you're querying a lot of records, we're not going to sort of take a lot of time to bring all 1 million cells back to your user. What we'll do is we'll chunk those up into discrete pages that you can then iterate through to, again, help with the performance of your scripts and your requests and your processes. So in this case, a lot of times when we'll make this report, we'll be told in one of the parameters how many records in total this query, or how many entries, I should say, this query returned, and how many are in this sort of first page of response. And we can use this skip parameter to get to sort of the next page, the next response. Top, again, we're not going to use today, but this will essentially filter the number of rows returned, or the number of objects returned from the API. So a really cool use case would be, maybe you want to trend the top 10 fault reasons day over day to see how many times one creeped into that top 10. You could create a summary report of all of your losses grouped by reason and set a parameter here of 10. And even if you have hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of sort of reasons why this particular process failed, we'll only get the top 10. So you can do sort of that type of reporting to see sort of how frequently you're running into particular issues. All right, cool. So that's, we're not going to be using those today, but they are super powerful, and you should check them out if you have a chance. Some more information here. Next, we're going to go through, sort of our realm host name. For us, it's really easy. It's demo.quickbase.com, but this could be like yourcompany.quickbase.com. And then this next line here is what's called a user agent. So this is a way for you to sort of name what this integration is. It's really important to do because there are cases where you could have maybe a runaway pipeline. You didn't get your conditional logic quite right. Or you have a runaway script, or it's taking a long time to execute. When you reach out to our care team and we need to look through our logs to determine what's happening here, what's causing all this slowdown, we could very easily say, hey, this is related to, in our case, the trending loss pipeline user agent. So this is just a way for you to communicate to us what exactly this integration does. Really important to do. The last thing here we'll need is our authorization. Now, we're going to do two things today. We're going to use a user token auth when we're building our pipeline, and we're going to use what's called temporary authentication just to get a sense of what this response looks like. So what you can do down here is go to auth and select this get a temporary token for DBID. Now, what I'll do here is I'm going to paste in that DBID that we had copied earlier, because we need actually a table ID here, not an application ID. And one tool that I highly recommend all of you sort of get your hands on is one of these. It's called a clipboard manager. And what this will do is allow you to basically save many different things to your clipboard. So you don't have to worry about going to find that one string that you had copied again. And you've got hundreds of tabs open because your brain's kind of frazzly like mine can get. But again, just pasting that DBID here. We have our realm host name, our user agent already sort of carried over. I disabled app tokens for this purpose, but we're going to send this. And what this will do, it actually uses the ticket that's in your browser, so your session ticket, and it sort of creates a new authentication string for you so you can create requests more rapidly and sort of test and iterate upon them. So I'm going to click this copy button here and then pop into my run a report API again. And now if you'll notice, we actually save what all of these inputs are, so you don't have to worry about re-entering them. And now in our authorization over here, I'm going to click that copy icon again, and it pasted in that temporary token. And I believe this is good for about 5 minutes. Now, what I just did, I just clicked the send response here, and this essentially just made a request for this data. And now what we're going to do next is sort of tease apart what this data structure looks like and how it corresponds to our summary report. And we're actually going to use this to tell pipelines, to give pipelines a little hint about what type of data it should be expecting on the way back. Awesome. Cool. Let me move on. We're going to do this sort of Zoom shuffle. I'm going to stop sharing so we can sort of all focus on this next portion. We're going to map out what the response looks like to what the summary report is sort of telling us and giving us. So really, really simple. Again, it looks intimidating, sort of all of this pseudocode, this JSON, especially if you don't have experience with this type of functionality or this type of API. But we're going to try to boil this down really, really simply. And what this is doing is essentially breaking out our summary report into columns and into rows. So each one of these, what we're going to call objects, is really from sort of this parenthesis to this parenthesis down here is really just a row in our summary report. Again, I'll just give you 1 second to let that sink in. Sort of hopefully the gears are turning to the actual power that this is bringing forth. Again, one of my favorite APIs. Now, really simply, we're going to sort of map what the response is giving us to what the summary report is showing in the UI. So this first column here, what we see is ACMR 341, maps over here to this value. So it's in sort of this nested object called 2. And that 2 is what we call an index. And now our indexes on reports, or in this report API, start at 2, and they increment from left to right by 1. So in our next sort of column, we have our number of losses, which is equal to 10. We can see that here in column 3. Our product ID is in column 4. Our downtime of 4.13 minutes, so that you see Quickbase is doing some formatting for us here. actually comes back as the raw duration value in the API. Now, this might seem confusing, maybe a little intimidating, but I promise that if you import that value into the same type field, so into a duration field, we'll actually format that for you, and we'll get that nice, 4.13 minutes. Same over here. Again, another 4.13 minutes. That's in column 6. Column 7 is our performance downtime, and then column 8 is our overall equipment effectiveness metric. Okay, lot to take in, I promise. Hopefully it's you're starting to wrap your mind around it, especially if you don't have sort of familiarity with APIs and JSON notation, and hopefully you're starting to see how powerful something like this could be. But I do think it's only as powerful as sort of what methods we use to get the data into Quickbase. So now let's hop back into pipelines. I'll move pretty quickly through this portion since it's actually a really, really simple pipeline, and hopefully we'll have time for some questions at the end. All right, so everybody should be seeing my screen again. I think I see it on my presenter view. I think we're looking good. So we're just going to jump right into pipelines. So I've created this pipeline a few different times. So you'll see, my trend data, my big turkey here, a few different times. I'm going to create this from scratch again. Actually, this is one of the first times that I've used the new style on pipeline. I have to say, I really like the way that we are sort of presenting this. So I'm going to name my pipeline something that's going to make sense to me. So we're going to be trending, loss data. Maybe we'll call it our daily trending loss data. Description, you can add this. I'll leave this blank for now, but then we can add tags. So to help better organize your pipelines. Now I have one here for trending data, but I could very easily create a new tag called create a new tag. This will pop up right here. So really sort of powerful way to organize your pipelines. Find them later. Okay, cool. This is a pipeline. This should look fairly familiar to to you folks who have experience with this. I've starred the 2 channels that we're going to use. So the first thing that we're going to do is have an action to fetch JSON using the JSON handler endpoint. All right, now this should start to look a little familiar, and we'll start to see some common patterns between what we input over here in the RESTful API and what we're putting over here on JSON, or on our JSON connector. So for authentication, we're actually going to use a Quickbase user token, and I've actually copied our user token to a clipboard earlier. Now, by the time this session is over, I will have disabled this, so don't get any ideas. And now we need our JSON URL up here, which, as we remember, was sort of dynamically filled in for us at the top of our request. So we're just going to copy and we're going to paste this over here. Great. Now we're going to click more. We have a little more work to do, and we're going to start with the outgoing methods request type. And this should just match whatever the RESTful API is telling us. So I'm going to change this to a post. And now we get to the fun part. We get to our headers. So I'm first going to enter in our realm host name. So I'll just start typing qb-realm-host name. And we separate these with a colon, so you can actually see that down here. We're going to call this demo. And then we also need our user-agent, which is trending _loss_pipeline. Great. Now our request body in this case is empty. But if you wanted to use the JSON channel maybe to upsert some records, you could, here, let's just show you what the body might look like here, and one of the advantages of our RESTful API over some of our over our XML API. So in this case, this request takes a body as part of its parameter. And we'll actually give you sort of an example of what this will look like. So in this case, hey, we're going to upsert records into this table. Here's what the data looks like in field 6. We get this is my text. In field 7, we get 10. In field 8, we get this date stamp. And you can copy this and sort of fiddle with that in the body parameter over here and even in pipeline. So let's get back to our run a report, and let's get that sort of test data up here again. And you'll notice, oh no, I've got bad authorization. We've lost it. So don't worry, I can very easily come in here, just hit send again, copy this, go back to my run a report, paste it, and look at that. We're good for another 5 minutes. This will be here until sort of we move around, but we've got sort of 5 minutes here. Great. So in this sort of method, we're actually only using one step run for JSON. Since we're running this once a day, we're going to make one request for our JSON data, and then we're going to iterate over it and create Quickbase records, which are now included as part of all of your step runs. They don't count towards your billable step runs. So we're going to skip the request body, and I believe we are good. We've got our user token. We don't need our username or password or any of this stuff here. We are going to minimize this. We're going to move on to the next step where we iterate over our JSON records. We're going to iterate over all of the records that are returned, or all the rows that are returned in our summary report response. So the first thing that pipelines will ask you for here is a JSON schema sample. And this is going to help it build these requests on the other side. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy just one of the objects that was returned in our array, in our data array. So I'm going to come from this first parenthesis after this square bracket, which denotes the beginning of an array, and I'm going to go all the way to the very end. And you'll notice our objects or our rows here are separated by commas. So I'm going to copy this to my clipboard, and then we're going to paste the schema sample over here. And again, we're just giving pipelines a little bit of a hint as to what it should expect when it makes this request for JSON records. Next thing we need to do is to tell pipelines where to actually look for these records. So this is very simple. We're going to look in the data array. So the path here comes right after data. Cool. Very, very simple. So I'm going to now minimize this. And now you'll notice pipelines, thank you, has already created a loop for me. So we're going to iterate through each one of these records to create a record in Quickbase. So I'm going to come here, going to drag my create record over, and our account, this is the user token that I created earlier, and I'm going to look for my, I think it's issue trends, okay, here. Awesome. And now I'm going to set the fields to specify values for. So we're going to get the availability downtime, the date, the number of losses, the OEE, the performance downtime, the quality downtime, and our related products. So essentially all those fields that we created, we need. Now, if you notice over here on the right-hand side, on the right-hand side, like you can see where I'm pointing, you'll see our sample response has been sort of pre-created for us over here that we can use to now really quickly drag over into our inputs over here. And it looks very simple, or very similar, I should say, to how our data structure looks over here. So what might help us here, I'm actually going to move our summary report to this side. And we're going to just, remember, we're just going to count from 2 the order that these records, or I should say that these rows appear in our summary report. So the first thing I'll do, we know that this is number 2. We don't have a product name, but we do have a related product, which helps us get the product name. So we're going to skip over column 2 and move on to column 3, which is our number of losses. So over here, we're going to find N3, and we're going to drag it over here to number of losses, okay? N4, so 234 is our product ID. We want to fill that over here, product ID. 5 is availability downtime, which must mean that quality downtime is 6, performance downtime is 7, OEE is 8, OEE is 8, all right, and the date. Now, we don't have a date. You could use the date created. In fact, I'd recommend that you use the date created, but if you wanted to add another significant date, what you would do here is just 2 curly braces to denote, hey, we need to do a little math or a little sort of calculation. We're just going to say time.today, and this will get us today's date. And that's it. This is our pipeline. This is what's going to help create those really, really powerful reports. And I sort of stepped through this pretty slowly. Hopefully you were able to follow along, and hopefully you can sort of draw the link between sort of with relatively little effort, we were able to create a really, really powerful data reporting structure. So now what I want to do actually is I want to make sure that we schedule this. And remember that question that we asked ourselves much earlier, how often do we want to trend this? We want to trend this every day. And actually I want to use New York time because we don't have Boston time. And we want to trend this every day, and we're going to say at 11, let's say 11:11. And we're doing this off hours because this is, it could be a stored procedure. We don't necessarily need to see this during business hours. If we check in the next day, it's probably better for us anyway. And because we're running this off hours, you don't have to worry about sort of conflicting traffic or creating traffic jams in your application as your users are interacting with your apps. So we're going to do this at night. But I'm a little impatient, and I'm going to go ahead and click run. And it's one of my favorite parts about pipelines. In the old world that I used to work in when I was developing apps for Quickbase, I used a lot of different sort of iPaaS solutions. We never had sort of the record level detail here that we get with pipelines, where I can actually see each one of the objects that was returned in our string. And we can remember, hey, here's N2, that's our PLR 400, looks awfully close to here. So we can sort of see in real time that this is working. And you can also see as we scroll down that our records were created. Super cool. All right, so let's pop back into Quickbase and take a look at what our data looks like. All right, so here's our record for 527. We have the GEM 100. We've got 42 losses. The product was 2. We were down for 22.79 minutes today. Due to availability, performance was 48.27, quality was 10.72. We can just cross-check this really quickly, make sure that the data looks right. Now, I know it's right because I've done this before, but you'll always want to double-check. Gem, yep, we got 42, product 32, 22.79, 10.72, 48.27. Awesome. So it's working. Oh, except what we don't have here, our OEE is a little malformed. And this can happen as you're sort of converting percentages back to raw numbers and then into percentages again. And what I'll do here to make it really simple, and maybe kind of showcase some of the power of pipelines here, what we'll do is we're going to multiply the OEE by 100, so our number comes in, our percentage comes here nice and formatted. And I'm just going to come in here really quickly, delete these 10 records that were created today. We're going to click delete, hit yes. Wonderful, 10 records deleted. I'm gonna run this again. All right, starting up. So JSON response. There are objects and created those 10 records for us. Let's double check to make sure that they look nice and tidy now. Awesome, cool, much better, look formatted, look great, gorgeous. What I do want to remember to do is to turn on this pipeline again. Okay, last thing I'll show you, maybe to sort of showcase some of the advancements we've made to our data visualization capabilities here. Here is I've created a sort of a trend report that we can use in our apps, put on our new dashboards, put on our existing home pages to see how our data is trending over time. Now, one thing to sort of keep in mind, as you're creating these reports, really good idea to sort of categorize this or group this by our x-axis. Group the x-axis by our date field so you can see how this changes over time. You can group by availability, quality, and performance downtime to get a better sense of how this is changing. And again, hey, we had, in this case, a lot of downtime due to availability on May 23rd. Let's drill into this, actually see where the problem stems from for availability. Look at that. Over 90 minutes of downtime across 5 different products. So let's drill in and see, how we can sort of improve our efficiency there. Last thing that I'll show off here, I've actually added this report to a dashboard that I had created in Untitled tab 2 down here. And I can scroll down to see, there's my sort of beautiful new trend report. And because this is so well integrated with our application, and because we've sort of related up to our products, I can actually slice this by products to see how has the GEM 100 performed sort of day over day over the past, in this case, little over a month. How are we looking? So again, all of these new tools are at your disposal. You can, very easily sort of read out this data to your peers, to your colleagues, to your executives, to get that, sort of next level of data out of your Quickbase applications. So just to recap, I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing my screen. We're going to go back to PowerPoint. So just to recap, 3 pieces that we use today in order to create these really powerful trend reports was Quickbase. Quickbase gave us the summarized data. We used basically the raw muscle of Quickbase to create those visualizations, to create the summarized data that we needed to trend. We used the new report or run a report endpoint in the RESTful API to call that summarized data, to get what the user is seeing in the UI and sort of transform that into data that's then actionable. And then we use pipelines to sort of pull all of this together, to go get the data from our summary report using the RESTful API, to iterate over it, and then to create records in our Quickbase app. Now, if some of you were I did a similar session last year. It was much more complex and complicated. We had to do a lot of sort of JSON notation to get our records or to get our data sort of structured the way that we could, using as few step runs as possible, was to make sure that we could do this efficiently. But because we now have sort of those free Quickbase to Quickbase pipelines, or those free Quickbase actions that don't count towards your billable step runs, we're able to sort of expand the types of use cases that we can use with pipelines in a sort of responsible manner. So with that, I think we've got about 13 minutes for questions, which is great. So I think Daniel, Aman, do we have any in the chat that we wanted to answer?
There's one question in the Q&A, if you can see that.
Oh, hold on. Let me get my Q&A. Awesome. All right. How does this compare with creating an automation that creates new records based on the summary field data? Seems like an automation would be the low-code approach versus learning JSON inputs. Yeah, that's a really, really great question, Jeffrey. What I'll say is that the summary report, getting it this way, saves us a whole ton of application overhead. Really, the only way to do this with automations was to be able to create that statistics table. In this case, we would create, we would create a statistics table for our products, right? And we would roll up those records, roll up summary fields to our products table to count the number of losses for a particular day, and then execute the table-to-table import. So while this is, maybe broaching low code, I'd say JSON is really a widely used sort of notation for data structure. And I know our Quickbase builders are always sort of aspiring to learn new things to put in their toolkit. JSON is a really, really handy resource, a really handy way to understand how really all programs, most software, how data is structured sort of on the back end. But I will say, going this approach, well, it is maybe more in the low code than the no code approach. It saves you a heck of a lot of app overhead. It is more performant since we don't have to rely on Quickbase to calculate all those summary tables. And in my opinion, it's easier to maintain. Think about this: if we were adding products rapidly, it doesn't have to be products. If the data that you're trending sort of changes rapidly, you do save yourself the overhead of having to go and add those to your statistics table to then summarize up and make sure that all your records are related. This is sort of an easy breezy, beautiful way. We did this in probably 45 minutes to create, these powerful trend reports. Awesome. Hope that answered your question, Jeff, but if it didn't, happy to talk to you more about this offline. You can find me in Slack. Awesome. Another question from Meg Downing. Hey, Meg, is it possible to create a trend report from a certain date in the past using historical data? Let's see, let me think about this. My gut instinct for every question regarding Quickbase is yes, of course we can do that. But let's think. I would say that as long as the date that you're reporting on is sort of static, or the data that you're reporting on is static historically, so that historical data doesn't change over time, and you don't want to capture that change, then you can absolutely create, trend reports based on historical data. But remember, the advantage to this is that our loss data changes sort of day over day over day, and even minute over minute, right? So we want to be sure to get that data sort of as it's happening, to sort of abstract out, create a new table, so then we can report on those records. Cool. Yes, Paula, hey, you came in late. Oops, sorry you missed the beginning. Good news is that this was recorded. It should be available within a couple hours on 24 platform. And then I think we'll post all these to YouTube after the fact. Can you get the JSON report link that you were using? Yeah, so that is actually our new developer portal. You should be able to scroll up in the attendee chat, or maybe, actually I'll link that again. Here is our RESTful APIs, developer.quickbase.com. Really easy to remember. Cool, and yeah, and over there you'll be able to explore all of the new sort of JSON APIs that are available. All right, can't be only 3 questions. There's gotta be some more out there. I'm happy to hang out as long as we need. Okay. Awesome. Daniel, Aman, you guys have any questions? You guys good? I think so. Yeah.
No, I'm good. Those are the only ones that have come in so far. So I think folks are just kind of following.
Awesome. Cool. All right. Well, with that, I think we'll end our session here, and see you next year. All right. See you, folks.